I started doing comics when I was 5 years old and did not know what comics were. I had not read comics. I had read probably some Dr. Seuss at that point, or whatever. But I was sitting with some paper and a pencil at our coffee table in the living room as a 5-year-old kid, and I had this idea. I was afraid of the garbage truck when it went by because it made so much noise and did so many things. As a little kid, it sort of scared me. So I created Trash Can Man, and I made this little, and it was sequential art. I did not know what I was doing. It was just instinctive.
Awesome.
So I created this little stick figure guy who had an upturned, those old round metal trash cans I used to have?
Oh yeah.
It was one of those, so it was like a suit of armor, and he could get his arms were out and his head was out, and he used the lid, because they had those lids. He used the lid as a shield, and he had a sword.
That's
and
awesome.
I drew like a garbage truck, and it had like teeth. It was kind of, anthropomorphized, and that was his enemy. He was the trash can man. He was fighting this monster garbage truck, and there was like this little sequence of pictures of him. I think I redrew it and I put it someplace. I probably still have it. I should show it someday. It's kind of funny, but it was like that was it. That was this little idea I had when I was 5, and of course later I discovered comics. I loved them, and I of course discovered books. I was given The Hobbit on my birthday. I think when I turned like 7 or 8 or something, and I read that. And I read that, and then my brother and sister-in-law who'd given it to me, they were like, "There's more. That ring he finds? There's a whole other story. There's more to that." And I'm like, "Gimme." So the next thing I know, I'm reading Lord of the Rings, and it was like, gone. I was done. I'm like, I'm a bookworm by that point. So by the time I'm like 10, 12 years old, I'm a bookworm, full on. And then I got kind of like. I had done some comics, but I had gotten more interested in like fantasy and science fiction novels. And by the time I was like, I don't know, I want to say 18 or 19, I kind of gravitated back into comics. This is about the time that suddenly Frank Miller did the Daredevil run.
Oh, jeez.
And I just happened to be there for that. And it was like, holy crap, this is great. And I'm like, I'm into comics now. So I got big comics. And the next thing I know, I'm like, I want to do this. I want to get into comics. So I started going down to San Diego Comic-Con. Now, back then, it was still the biggest show in the country, but it wasn't that big. It was like it is now, but it was big. But I was going down there, and then I started meeting, editors from Marvel and stuff. And I went down there 2 or 3 years in a row, and I wound up meeting Richard Starkings, who was on staff at Marvel UK, doing a book for them that, like, I guess they weren't feeling like they were getting a lot of love for here in the States, but I had read it and I liked it. So I was able to talk to them about it. So they were like impressed with that. And Richard's like, you're from LA. I'm like, yeah, I'm from LA. And he's like, I've always wanted to see LA. I'm like, well, why don't you come up and visit after the show? And he did. And we hit it off and we made friends and hung out. And the next thing I know, he'd gone back to England and then he moved to New York. And he was in New York and he calls me and he says, there's an opening. I was working for a magazine company in LA at the time, just, on staff as an, assistant editorial. And he said, there's an opening coming up here at Marvel for an assistant editor with Bobby Chase. He's like, why don't you apply for it and come out here and stay with me in New York and get the job, kind of thing. And I'm like, you on it. So I'm like, I loaded up my car. I sent in an application and I drove to New York. And I was in New York and I was only there a few days, had the interview with Bobby Chase. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. Suddenly I start freaking out. I don't know what's going to happen if I don't get this job because I only planned on getting this job at Marvel. I don't know anybody here but Richard, and I'm going, I get the job. So I go to work for Marvel Comics just like that. Boom, I'm in. And I'm working for Marvel Comics. So I did some work for Marvel Comics. I worked on, now I went by Gary Barnum because that's my birth name. It's not, my middle name is Alin, and Barnum is a name that my father took from his stepfather. It's not even the family name. So Alin Silverwood is really a better name for me anyway. But anyway, so if you see anything for Gary Barnum, Marvel Comics, back in the day, that was me. I worked on The Incredible Hulk and the revival of Ghost Rider and G.I. Joe, which I had a blast with, working with Larry Hama. And of course, the Hulk, we were working with Peter David. And these guys were all just amazing and fun. And the artists were great. And She-Hulk, we got to work with Steve Gerber.
That's cool.
And so different people coming through. It was just a blast. It was an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.